Welcome back. This is Hunkered Vegans again. We made an episode out of our Italian dinner. Hopefully, that was our very first try at videoing anything, so you get to look at it and critique it and, whatever. So, I'm going to make two dishes today. Based on some of the fresh ingredients that I got from the supermarket. Again, I'm cooking without a recipe, but I kind of want to talk you through how we do that. So, the first thing we're doing is a mushroom barley soup. Now, the barley that I have is called hulled barley. It's not pearled barley. And the difference is it takes about twice as long to cook. So when I use it in a soup, I do what's over here on the stove. I get the water boiling and start cooking the barley. Because what I can do is I can sweat my vegetables and add them to the boiling mixture. I do this just because it's going to take at least an hour, probably an hour and a half, to get this barley to where we want it to be. So I took my herbs, my aromatics, my garlic, bay leaf, my spices. I'm making about 1.5 gallons of soup, so there's that many quarts. There's 6 quarts of water in here. A little bit of vegan, actually vegan chicken base, because that's what I've got on hand. Vegetable stock works well. If you really wanted a nice meaty texture, you could also use the not beef stock. Honestly, anything will work for your base. But what I've got in here is a little bit of the not chicken stock that I had on hand. So that's cooking with some herbs. It's boiling the barley, because as I said, the barley is going to take a while to cook. We're going to do our onions, our carrots, in a side pan over here, and our mushrooms, and then we're going to add it to the soup. So we're making a nice hearty mushroom barley soup. We're going to have a huge pot of it when we're done, so that's going to feed us for a little while. The mushrooms over here, I do wash mushrooms. That's how I was taught years ago in the kitchen. There's this whole thing about adding water to them. Screw that, you really don't. It's fine. Just kind of wash off the dirt, clean the mushrooms. I like them cleaned with water, especially right now. So all I'm doing here is I'm chopping my vegetables so that we can do a little mise en place or have everything ready in place. I'm using a little bigger chunk in my carrots because, again, this soup cooks for a long time. Otherwise, I generally tend to use a little smaller chunk. Right now, I've only got my little cutting board, so that's what we're working on. Again, we scrub these down already. And all I'm doing here is just trying to keep my pieces even once they're chopped. So they cook about evenly, and it makes for a prettier soup. Really, what the fuck else do I have to do? And again, mise en place is just the idea of having everything kind of pre-done. And again, the only thing I didn't do with this is I wanted to get that barley cooking. I'm going to do a little bit of curbside delivery today. Just for a couple of friends who I want to keep nourished and on the air. So I want to make sure that the soup gets done. So we're going to give the barley some extra time to cook. And we're just going to use one more pan to saute the vegetables and get them the way we like them, and then add them into the soup. Perfectly fine, works out well, it's going to be delicious. The other thing that I'm going to make today, and this is a trial because I have not tried it yet, is my grandmother's Hungarian Cabbage Noodles. Now the difference is, Nanny always used bacon as her base, and then the bacon grease to fry the cabbage and the onion and the garlic. We're gonna do it a little bit differently. I'm not going to call it a healthy dish because that would be silly, but we're going to use some olive oil, and then we're going to finish it with some vegan butter for the buttery flavor that's usually present. Now, the dish is also called halushki or halushka. It's a Polish dish, and they don't tend to use the bacon. They tend to just use the fried cabbage and an onion. Some bake it. My grandmother never did. My grandmother didn't use an oven if she could help it. So we're gonna try it. We're gonna try a vegan version of that because I want to send something hearty and comfort food, and both of these things are that. Okay, so I have a little bit of olive oil going. If I was trying to make this completely whole food plant-based, I would do a sauteed in stock, which I often do. You know what? A little bit of fat right now, I'm okay with. It's going to do some nice things with our vegetables, and it's also going to make this just a little bit hearty. Just a couple tablespoons to get my aromatics go, to get my onions going, and my carrots. And as I said, we're going to do this in steps, so let's get these in there. And honestly, I mean, I like to give the carrots a little bit of extra zhuzh. This soup cooks for so long, that's not probably necessary, but let's do it. The carrot that didn't fit the bowl now. What I didn't have today was celery. And by the way, this is why you wash your mushrooms. I washed my mushrooms in here. That's what came off of them. That's why I don't just do it with a brush. So we're going to chop the mushrooms. I didn't do them first because this takes a little bit to brown. So I might as well get these started. Our soup is simmering nicely. Imparting that barley with lots of good flavor. And we'll keep checking. Now, one of the seasonings that I added, and again, this is, I make a lot of soup. I like some thyme with both mushrooms and with the barley soup, so I did put a little bit of thyme in there. My bay leaves, I mentioned my garlic already. I also put probably 2 or 3 tablespoons of liquid aminos. It's going to give you a little bit more of a meaty flavor. So that's cooking in there, a little bit of crushed red pepper. Just simmering our barley down. We may have to add a little water as time goes on. So that's going to cook away. We're going to get these going, and I'm going to chop my mushrooms so we can also reduce those and get some nice browning, release their juices, get some nice texture from the chopped mushrooms. Now, because it is a soup, I chop everything so it'll fit on a spoon. So we're not going to have sliced mushrooms so much as chopped. And I have a mixture of cremini and white. Now, just to get that going a little bit better, I'm going to salt this. Now, I did not, I'll tell you what I did do, because I don't have celery. I put some celery salt and a little bit of celery seed here in the broth. So we'll still get the flavors. Don't sweat it if you're missing an ingredient. There's plenty of things you can do. And layer flavor with onion powder, garlic powder. And you know, sometimes even when I've used fresh onion or fresh garlic, I taste it and I want what the powder will impart. And I add a little bit more, and that's how I adjust it. And that's how we, before it goes to the table, it happens a lot. We're gonna let these sweat it out. We're not really going for a brown, we're going for a good translucent. If we get a little color on the onion, I'm happy with that. And we're just kind of getting our carrots started. That's going to go while I go chop some mushrooms. Just going for some uniformity with the mushrooms. Get them chopped up again so they'll fit on a spoon. I really like using dried mushrooms, A, when I can afford them, and B, when I have them. They're a good pantry staple. You rehydrate them, they impart a lot of flavor. I use porcini and different things. I just don't happen to have them, and I didn't spend that money. So I'm just using the mix of cremini and white button. These are going to be just fine to make our soup. Again, I'm just going for some uniformity here. So chop these up so that they'll fit on. They'll fit on your spoon. Chop, you know, it's going to put the flavor all through it, the mushrooms all through it. And these are, of course, going to cook down more once we release all the good juices. An exact science. I bought a bunch of mushrooms when we went to the store because I've got a few recipes that use them. I already made a a riff on a Tuscan white bean soup with some white beans and kale that I did add mushrooms to, and I used a mushroom stock in, and it was delicious. When I make a shepherd's pie, I don't just use lentil as the filling. I also tend to grind up some mushroom and use it in the sauce or in the as the meat replacement. Mushrooms are just versatile, and they're meaty, and they're really good for you, and I like cooking with them a lot, and we enjoy eating them. Everyone doesn't, but we do. Again, we're just going to keep chopping here, and then we'll add them to the pan in a minute. Okay, so as I said, I'm working a little bit backward because I wanted to get that barley going. But we've got a nice translucent onion, brought up some good flavor, let them release their juices, and I need this pan to do my mushrooms. So into the soup go our onions and our carrots, and we'll just give it a good stir. And then we're going to do our mushrooms. Back into the pan we've already been using. I'm going to stir our chopped mushrooms. Mushrooms love wine when you have it. Just going to use a little salt here. I love to do them in white wine, red wine, depending on what you're using, sherry if you have it, or in this case, I'm going to throw a little cognac in. I'm going to let these cook up. We're going to let go of that juice, and it's all going to go right into the pan. We're going to let the mushrooms talk to us. It's going to take a little bit. Sometimes I do the mushrooms with the herbs. I mean, if I'm building the soup the way I normally build a soup, and we add the liquids last, I'd be doing this probably in the bottom of the stock pot. You can see these are already starting to let go of their juice. Let them keep doing that until we get some good brown, get a little bit of sear. This is going to give a great texture. It's going to add more flavor to our soup than if we had just thrown them in. Okay. So you can already see how much juice is coming out of these mushrooms. The mushrooms contain a lot of water. And what we're doing here is we're seasoning that up and we're intensifying that flavor so that it's not so watered down in the soup. So we're concentrating. And the other thing I'm going to add here is some low sodium tamari, which is soy sauce. Probably about a teaspoon. This is going to, again, give us another level of a meaty flavor and texture without, flavor without adding any meat. We're just going to let these go and let that reduce. Beautiful. Well, it's not always in mushroom barley soup. It's always in mine. I like some potato. It adds a nice depth. It helps to thicken the soup with the starch, and it just makes it that much heartier. And as I said, the one thing I don't have is celery right now, so it's going to add an extra element. This is a nice hearty rustic soup, so all I did was scrub down our potatoes. I didn't peel them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. We're going to add this to the broth 30 minutes or so before the soup is done, but that's the last of what I have to do for this soup. So these mushrooms have had a good chance to reduce. Oh, it's a shame you can't smell. These are ready to go right into the soup along with that delicious reduced juice. We're going to let that stir that in. This is already thickening up nicely from the barley. Everything is going to talk to each other for a while. You can see it's already getting thick and it's reducing, so we are going to add probably another 2 cups of water because this has a little ways to go. So the second dish I'm going to work on, my grandmother called kapustát, which is really just the Hungarian word for cabbage. Kapustát testo, I believe, is the way you would say cabbage and noodles in Hungarian. Nanny wasn't always accurate. So what you want to do is get rid of the green outer leaves from your cabbage before we start to use it. And we're going to chop this. So let's go in half. We want to get rid of that bitter core. So we cut around the core. Just like that. Gone. And then this gets a rough chop. Now the way my grandmother made cabbage and noodles was low and slow. You cooked your cabbage. Low and slow. Because you really want to caramelize the cabbage, bring out the sweetness in it. And I have found, while most recipes say start the onion at the same time, I let the cabbage go for probably 15 minutes or so before I add the onion. Because the onion it just doesn't take as long. And I've had this where the onion came out feeling a little bit burned. So we're gonna be careful with that this time. As I said, a nice rough chop, probably about 1 inch square. And these will break up as they cook. As long as it's not the core, you know, you want to use the whole head of cabbage except for the outer leaves. Just break it apart so it gets nice surface area as it browns, and then just stir it up. There were times my grandmother did this with 2 big heads of cabbage and less than a pound of bacon. Although, you know, if you had a pound, you used it. But very often I saw her only do maybe a half a pound of bacon. But if there were a lot of people to feed, she might do 2 full pounds of pasta, and she might do 2 large heads of cabbage and a whole bunch of onion and garlic. Because we are doing a vegan version, obviously we will not be using bacon. I thought about doing this with a bacon substitute, but I'm going to play with the seasoning a little bit this time, because I still don't have a crunchy bacon substitute that I'm in love with. So let's see how this comes, because my favorite part of this has always been the cabbage and the onion anyway, and the way it just dresses the pasta. Again, this is not a healthy dish by any stretch of the imagination, but it is delicious, and it's comfort food from my childhood. And you know, my friends have been eating this for the 20 years we've known each other, and they've gotten to love it too. So it's become their comfort food as well. So that's a chopped head of cabbage. We're going to chop up a couple of onions, do our mise en place, and maybe 3. And then we will get going, letting the cabbage start to go. And I'm going to start it with olive oil, and as I said, we'll toss it with the olive oil, salt, and let it get going. And then after that, we'll add the onion in, and we're just going to finish it with some vegan butter. To get that buttery flavor, because that was what my grandmother did. But I can tell you, in my childhood, probably 75% of the time that I had the dish, I had it with margarine, because that's how we knew whether my father was laid off or not. Was whether there was butter in the house, and a lot of the time there was not butter. So my grandmother cooked with margarine, and she made everything from her cabbage noodles to her keef with good old store-bought margarine. I'm sorry, store brand margarine. Okay, so here's what I'm doing right now. I took about a tablespoon of maple syrup, a tablespoon of liquid aminos, and for now, just a quarter teaspoon of liquid smoke. So put the cabbage down, I'm going to dress it with that. Now, what I'm hoping is, as this continues, this is going to replace our bacon flavor. The smokiness, a little bit of the sweet, the maple I think will help, because sometimes I used to throw a little sugar on the cabbage and onion to help them keep going. But we're going to start here and then maybe revisit these seasonings. Again, we're testing this recipe for the first time. But I think that that's a good solid place to start without adding too much that I don't want to have. You'll note I'm cooking with beer. It's the fucking apocalypse. So, again, I'm going to start with probably easily a quarter cup of olive oil. Because again, we're replacing all the bacon. My grandmother would render the bacon low and slow until it was crisp in a pan, and then that is what we would use. So that's our replication. Some would say that's healthier. Whether it is or not. And I don't say that because olive oil is not a better choice. I say that because, all of the concentrated fats we put in our body are probably not good for our hearts. But that's a whole nother conversation I'm not trying to have right now. So I'm just going to cook. There's our head of cabbage. I'm going to go down into the frying pan. My grandmother always used a huge frying pan for this. You want as much surface area as you can get. And we're going to start frying up that cabbage. I'm going to take that seasoning mix I just made, and I'm going to put it in right now so it starts to flavor the cabbage. And with that, I'll put my first hit of salt, a little less than a teaspoon, and that's going to help sweat the cabbage. Now, as I'm watching the soup thicken, I've added about an extra quart of water. Now we may go back with a little more of our stock base if we need it for seasoning. We'll certainly go back with salt and pepper at the end. I'm going to finish this with a little bit of vinegar, probably apple cider, but we'll see. But this is thickening up beautifully. The barley is getting nice and tender. And this is going to be a beautiful soup when it's done. Okay, so, as I said, about 10 minutes the cabbage has been going. I'm starting to get some browning, it's starting to sweat. So now's when I'm going to throw the onions in. I'm end up doing 2 good-sized onions. I think that's about right for the... I pretty much had a medium-sized head of cabbage. I'm just going to stir them through. And really, cabbage noodles, the secret is it doesn't burn. It fries and caramelizes low and slow, and it gives a beautiful natural sweetness and flavor that there's nothing like it. We're going to just let this keep going. And we're going to give our soup a stir. I've thrown the potatoes in just for this last probably 30 minutes of cooking. We're going to do a final taste, but I can tell you it smells amazing. And it's going to be a nice hearty soup. Alright, so I'm turning this down a little bit. You'll see we're getting some nice browning starting. We're just going to keep stirring. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But I turned it down a little bit. We want color, and we really want this cabbage to all be nice and soft and caramelized. turn the heat down a little bit. We're just going to keep going. We're not there yet. Now, one of the things you can do also is you're browning, but if you're still having a little bit of crunch, instead of adding any more fat, just take a little water and add it to your pan. You're going to do a couple of things. You're going to deglaze the pan a little bit. And you're also going to give it some more moisture to help steam up that cabbage some more. And the onions. Keep them from burning as they continue to brown. Everybody doesn't add garlic to this dish, but my grandmother always did. In fact, my father used to say, Nanny would have put garlic in pancakes if she ever got out of bed that early. My grandmother liked to sleep in. I think garlic adds a really nice note to this dish, so I've carried that forward. The other thing she always did with this and many of her dishes was a whole lot of ground pepper. And Nanny probably would have had that in the pot already, but we haven't added it yet. We're going to let it keep going, but it's getting there. It's getting a beautiful brown color. You can smell the sweetness of the cabbage. And again, a little bit of water does help. And you can add it from time to time to let it keep steaming up, let it keep deglazing, and let it keep caramelizing everything. This is going to be delicious. Okay, we're about ready to taste this. So I'm going to season this up with a lot of good fresh ground pepper. And I mean generously. Like I said, this was one of Nanny's signatures in everything she did. She loved a lot of pepper, and she loved a lot of garlic. That's about right. I'm going to stir this in. We're going to see that little bit of seasoning I started with was enough, because we can throw a little more in here if we're ready. Now I've got a pot of water on the stove. Nice big pot of, actually this is Nanny's pot, of salted water. I'm going to use bow tie pasta. A lot of people with halushki use egg noodles. First of all, I don't eat egg noodles anymore. But even if I did, Nanny almost always made this with bow ties. Bow ties was one of those pastas that we always had in the house. And it just works beautifully with this, and it melts together nice, and it's incidentally vegan. So we're going to do that. We're going to taste this in a second. But it's getting a nice brown caramelized color all through it. I've added water a couple of times just to let it steam up the cabbage a little bit more, deglaze the pan, keep all those flavors going. We're almost done. Alright, so I'm going to taste this. We're going to see if my little seasoning trick at the beginning did enough to give the bacon flavor that I'm looking for. That's really pretty close. What I'm going to do is probably add a touch more smoke, liquid smoke, when I season our pasta before I melt this together. And a little bit of garlic powder, salt, and pepper on the pasta, because you're seasoning everything in the dish. But I'll tell you what, this is pretty close, and it's delicious. Okay, I just sampled our mushroom barley soup, and I was prepared to finish it with whatever seasoning I might need. And I've got to tell you, it's delicious. It's cooked down perfectly. Even though we added about a quart more of water, we didn't need to add any more of the stock base. No more salt, no more pepper. It's delicious as it is. And the only thing I'm going to add is some dried dill. If you have fresh dill, that's great. Here's the trick with dried dill. It immediately imparts flavor. It's not something that has to cook with the dish for hours to season it well. So that's all we're going to finish this with. I'm going to let it cool a little bit so that I can put it into jars and meet my friends at the curb so that they have some nutritious food. The other thing I'm going to meet them with is cabbage noodles as soon as this water boils, and we're going to put these things together. Okay, so I've cooked a pound of regular old bow tie noodles and drained them. And I'm going to season those up. Now here's where we're going to do the butter. 1, 2, about 3 good tablespoons of vegan butter. We're going to toss that around. And I'm going to season up the noodles before I combine. So we're going to do salt. We're going to grind some pepper, which I left over here. And again, it's Nanny's dish and it's comfort food, so it's a good amount of ground pepper right there. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to take a little garlic powder and dust the noodles with it. Right there. And this should be enough butter to finish the dish. Maybe that was a 1/4 cup, maybe not. And like I said, this is Nanny's old pot. I don't use it very often, but I thought it was kind of appropriate to bring it out for today. So there we go. Got seasoned up bow tie noodles. We're going to add our skillet of caramelized cabbage and onion and garlic. And again, we seasoned that up with some liquid aminos, I believe, and maple syrup, and just a touch of liquid smoke. And I didn't add any more. Look at that, it's beautiful. And then we toss it. I grew up eating this dish probably at least once a week. Maybe not so much in the summer, but definitely all winter long. And it's comfort food, and as I said, it can be multiplied. We used about 2 onions, 1 medium-sized head of cabbage, 1 full pound of bow tie noodles. And there you go. Now if you want to get creative, and you got a little fresh parsley, throw it on there for some color. You can do this with a salad, or with the soup that we just made if you really want to keep this kind of Eastern European and very early spring. And there we have it. A vegan version of Hungarian cabbage and noodles, or halushki. Okay, we're going to finish this with about a tablespoon of dill wheat. Dill is just a quintessential part of mushroom barley soup. It has the right smell, the right finished flavor to this really hearty soup. It's thick, it's delicious, it's nourishing, it's loaded with fiber and micronutrients. And we're going to jar it up and send it on its way curbside. I hope you enjoyed these 2 recipes. I'm not quite there with the cabbage noodles yet. They've got some good flavor. I actually picked up a couple of ideas by posting a picture online. I think we're going to play a little bit more with vegetable stock. And I really do think I want to work on a meaty substitute, something that replaces the bacon that was so much a part of my grandmother's recipe. But for a first attempt, it was very flavorful. And the mushroom barley soup has made several quarts that I can share with my friends. Thanks for joining me.